Good evening, America. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you, as always, from Washington, D.C. Tonight, we begin with some bombshell new news. It was about a year ago that we broke the story here at Just the News that Mike Morell, the former acting CIA director, was the man who coordinated with the Biden campaign to put out that famous or infamous letter from 51 intelligence analysts. We now know that the claims in that letter long ago were disproven. The laptop is real. But tonight we're going to bring you to a new territory. Just a short while ago, we confirmed with congressional staff that Congress has learned that several of the 51 signatories of that letter were active CIA contractors. In other words, they were arms of the government at the time they signed the letter, and that the senior leadership of the CIA, the Trump CIA, was aware this letter was coming out and what it was going to say prior to it coming out, and they did not intervene. That information coming out right now on justthenews.com with my good colleague Stephen Richards and I. We're working on it. We'll get more throughout the next couple of hours. Congressman Jim Jordan and the Weaponization Subcommittee responsible for ascertaining this information today, along with the House Intelligence Committee. It's a good time to bring in my amazing co-host, Amanda. Amanda, just to get your reaction, man, the whole intelligence community was in on this thing.
My goodness. Well, and I don't think that that's anything new as far as what we always see, President Trump, and it seems like it's the world against President Trump. And I think, touching on the news of Thursday's debate, I think that's what it might end up being on Thursday as well. I think it'll end up being 3-on-1. But we've got a lot of headlines to get into tonight, but I want to touch on these just before we get to our very first guest. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange will be a free man after reaching a plea agreement with the United States. He is pleading guilty to an Espionage Act felony dealing with publishing U.S. military secrets. Now, he had been imprisoned in England for 5 years. The deal allows him to walk because of time served. His hearing, where he is pleading guilty, is taking place tomorrow in the Northern Mariana Islands, which is a U.S. Commonwealth. Now, it seems that some politicians and officials on both sides of the aisle are not too thrilled about the deal. Former Vice President Mike Pence wrote this on X. Julian Assange endangered the lives of our troops in a time of war and should have been prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. There should be no plea deal to avoid prison for anyone that endangers the security of our military or the national security of the United States ever, end quote. I wonder if that includes our own government endangering our national security anyway. Democrat Senator Jack Reed and chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee echoed the same sentiments. Take a look.
He undermined the security of the United States. He did it systematically. He did it for his own gratification, self-promotion, etc. And that guilty plea speaks volumes.
On the other hand, to others, Julian Assange is a hero who exposed wrongdoings by our government and our military, who deserves First Amendment protection. And turning now to a story that John broke over on justthenews.com, the Pentagon is now admitting that it doesn't know if it funds dangerous biological research in China. This will be one of the themes of our show tonight. The Pentagon Inspector General wrote in a report that was concluded last month that the DoD did not track funding at the level of detail necessary to determine whether the DoD provided funding to Chinese research laboratories or other foreign countries for research related to enhancement of pathogens of pandemic potential. So, not so great that the Department of Defense can't figure out if it funded Chinese gain-of-function research. And I think that the theme of this should be money going to China at all. Really shouldn't be. But anyway, John, back to you. Let's get to our first guest.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing considering the DoD knows that China has been running an illicit biological weapons program since at least 2005. And yet it doesn't even track whether it's assisting that program with dangerous research. Pretty remarkable stuff. Yep, a lot happened today in Trump world, including the fact that the judge in the New York hush money trial lifted some parts of the gag order, freeing up President Trump to talk more freely about the witnesses and other things that occurred in his trial. Still can't criticize the court personnel, the jurors, or the judge, but has a little more latitude. That should help in the debate Thursday night when that question comes up. And we have the perfect first guest to join us tonight. He's the president of Citizens United, long an advisor and confidant to President Trump. He is our good friend, Dave Bossie, and he joins us right now. Dave, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me back, guys. I really appreciate it.
There is a headline that happened today that I believe you have a significant responsibility for. I think for a long time, the Commission on Presidential Debates lost the trust of at least half the country, if not more, with the way it conducted and created rules for the debates. Today, they had to admit they're pretty much out of the business in 2024. They're not going to be hosting any debates. Your thoughts on that, given the struggles you had with that commission?
Yeah, they're a corrupt, long-time corrupt organization. They really tried to hamper, damage, and destroy Donald Trump's ability to debate Hillary Clinton fairly in 2016. They did the same in 2020 against Joe Biden. They rigged it. They have their members of their board that are not supposed to speak out on either candidate attacking Donald Trump. They had moderators who had previously worked for Joe Biden. They have debates that start long after people start voting. They're a dinosaur. A group of us conservatives tried to take them on and out many years ago. It was a many-year process, but yesterday they finally announced that they will no longer be doing debates this year because obviously Donald Trump and Joe Biden aren't doing them with them. But this is a dead organization. They will never be resurrected, nor should they be.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. Speaking of the debate happening on Thursday, I think, and John and I have spoken about this on air, that there is a tendency to attack the low-hanging fruit pertaining to Joe Biden. The fact that, I think that his frailty might be on display on Thursday, especially considering it's 90 minutes long. He's going to have to be standing. How do Republicans keep the conversation away from that low-hanging fruit and set the bar to where it should be, which is talking about his policy?
Oh, I think Donald Trump will be laser focused on Joe Biden being the worst president in American history, whether it is the economy that he has left in tatters, whether it is the open border and the absolute destruction to our American society based on all of these folks coming in, whether it is crime and punishment, law and order, defunding the police, the radical left, and what they've done to destroy our inner cities, whether it is our foreign policy and the wars that Joe Biden is trying to get us in, whether it is the Middle East, Ukraine, and the botched Afghanistan withdrawal. Donald Trump is going to be laser focused on these issues. He is going to remind the American people this is a referendum on the worst president in American history, and that he does not deserve your vote. You are not better off today than you were 4 years ago, and that is the test of this election cycle, and it is the most consequential election. Look, guys like me say this is the most important election of our lifetime, and you hear that every 2 years.
Yep.
This one here, America is going to be going in a different direction if Joe Biden wins re-election, and we cannot have that.
Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, I think it could set the course for the next 25 years of American history. That's how precedent-setting I think this could be. Dave, I want to talk a little bit about what the debate moderators and the left and Joe Biden are going to want to do. They're going to want to try to bog Donald Trump down on January 6th, the election, the abortion. What's the best advice for the president to avoid that and to stay focused on what matters now, which is the economy, crime, the border, all the things that he's winning on in a policy debate?
Take their garbage questions, and they're going to be, because as you just said in the question, they're going to be loaded to try and harm President Trump. But pivot, take their question and pivot to the important elements. If they ask you a January 6th question, an election denier question, I would turn it right back around on the Democrats and on the election interference that they are currently involved in, whether it is the 51 intel letter that you guys were just breaking an incredible story on tonight, or if it is this criminalizing and weaponization of the Department of Justice and prosecutors around the country coming after Donald Trump. That you have to be able to turn it. And Donald Trump is a master at that. And I think if he stays focused on one thing, and that is he understands the American people are not voting for the past, they're voting for the future. So if the Democrats and the partisan reporters that are acting as moderators, they're going to want to try to trap him in the past, and he has to move past it and talk about what the American people care about, which is their futures, their children's futures.
Yeah, good advice.
Dave, in many election years, when there are debates, most people know what they're going to be doing in November. It's Republicans and Democrats, and they've been voting that way for a long time, and they intend to vote the same way coming up in a few months or coming up in November. This time around hits a little different because President Trump and Republicans are making plays in places that they haven't in the past 4 years or 8 years or 12 years or 16 or even 20. Virginia, for example, hasn't been in play since 2004 when it went for George W., but they've got a Republican governor now. What message does President Trump need to send? What does he need to focus on to pull some of those independent voters and folks who might be looking the other way?
It's a great question. And Donald Trump needs to be on offense. He needs to be on offense to win back Arizona and Georgia and Pennsylvania, which he did in 2016. But he also needs to focus heavily on Minnesota, on Virginia, as you just said. He needs to focus on Michigan and Wisconsin. And so if he is on offense in all of those states, he is going to win. And he is going to talk to those voters about how Joe Biden has impacted their lives, whether it is every town, every city being a border town or city now, whether it is their incredibly rising costs and inflation, and Joe Biden purposefully creating the inflation that the American people have felt through turning off the spigot of energy, which he undid everything that Donald Trump successfully did to make America energy independent. They also, the Biden administration, Joe Biden, purposefully opened the borders. They specifically and purposefully have used their executive orders, used their power to have a wave after wave after wave of immigrants coming into this country, and they're affecting people in Pennsylvania and in Minnesota and in Virginia. And if Donald Trump, talks to those voters about what is affecting them locally, he's going to decimate Joe Biden, because Joe Biden is, I can't believe I can say this, but Jimmy Carter has lived long enough now where he's no longer the worst president in American history.
How about that? I've heard that a lot, including in an Uber car the other day. Dave, we got about 30 seconds left. Real quickly, I hear a line that people say we can't afford another 4 years of Joe Biden, not in terms of life, money, expenses. Is that an easy, simple slogan that could become a fall rallying cry?
I think it is. I think saving America, right? Saving this country from the scourge, from the destruction of this socialist, radical left-wing agenda that Joe Biden has brought into this White House and is forcing down the throats of every American. He is somebody who's been taken over by the left, and he cannot afford to lose the Hamas wing of the Democrat Party in order to win re-election. It's vital for him. But I got to tell you, Donald Trump's ready to go, and he's going to win in November.
Well, we're going to be watching that on Thursday. Will be the first bellwether of that. As always, Dave Bossy, we love having you on. We get a lot of political wisdom. Folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, Congressman Tim Burett will be up next. He's got a lot of news. Stay tuned.
Welcome back, everybody, to Just the News, No Noise. I'm Amanda Head here, as always, with my Just the News editor-in-chief, John Solomon. All right, our next guest is doing everything that he possibly can to fight the corruption in our government. And as we have been learning, there's quite a bit of it. He has a new bill out that just passed that aims to stop American taxpayer dollars from going to the Taliban. Can you believe that that's even happening? Yes, your money being ripped out of your pockets forcibly and given to our enemies. Just for clarification's sake, the government isn't directly sending money to the Taliban. It's not pallets of cash in the middle of the night, but some of the money that we send to other countries is getting sent to the Taliban through them. So why are we allowing this? Well, with us to discuss more is the Congressman from Tennessee, Tim Burett. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thank y'all for having me.
Sir, Considering the fungibility of money, I know that it's very hard to track this money, but your bill aims to strip money from going to countries that can't exactly account for the fact that they are giving money or that money is flowing through to the Taliban. And kind of thematic with this show and some news that John dropped about the Pentagon not being able to identify how much money or if money is going to China for bioweapons research. I don't really care if it's Islamic terrorism or biological terrorism. Maybe if we can't specifically track the money, we shouldn't be giving them the money to begin with.
I agree, and you're correct. It's fungible. It just flows from one thing to the other. It's like water in a jar. You just shake it one way, it goes that way. Shake it the other way, it goes that way. And that's what this money's doing. We're seeing this time and time again. I was asking the State Department the way this came about in testimony if they could guarantee that the money was not getting to terrorists, and they said no, we can't. And we still continue to give these groups money and these countries money, and it's you know. And I put part of the blame on our State Department, and part of the blame on our dadgum Pentagon. You know, all these conspiracy theorists out here saying that, you know, we're starting these wars so people can get rich, and I'm not so certain that's not the case now, because you're seeing the investments that go on in missile defense systems and all this other stuff via our Pentagon and actually members of Congress in both parties. So this bill, all it does is just we hopefully it'll stop it. I know they'll find another way, but this will close off some of the avenues that these terrorists will get our money. I mean, this is the Taliban. You were talking, some reports are tens of millions of dollars. Yeah. I mean, billions, excuse me. I mean, you know, when you're talking $15 million back in Tennessee, you can just about build a high school with that. At least you could when I was mayor. It's probably gone up some since then, supply chain stuff. But still, you know, but you're talking billions of dollars going to our enemies. And these people don't like Christians. They don't like Jews. They don't like Americans. You know, they throw gay folks off of buildings. They treat women like cattle. And you know, our tax dollars, $35 trillion in debt. We don't need to. And I'm sorry I'm so jacked up. I'm kind of pumped up over this thing. I'm excited. It went unanimous. Even the Democrats supported it, so I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, that's a major victory. It's a major victory for the American people. Actually, it's a major victory for those we left behind in Afghanistan, too, because the Taliban is not their friend. Sir, I want to talk a little bit about the competency of our intelligence agencies and our security agencies. It seems as though the focus on ideological issues and social engineering grows with them in the core competencies. It's just common sense that you don't give money to the Taliban. It's common sense that you don't allow biological research to go to China when we know they have an illicit bioweapons program. When did those core competencies begin to be erased in these agencies? And what does it say about our security level if they're not focused on the things that matter to security?
Well, I think our intelligence agencies are misnamed, sort of like congressional ethics. I just don't think it exists, really. I mean, let's be honest. You know, you got 51 of these jacklegs that say this computer doesn't exist. It's Russian hoax. But, you know, I spent 6 years at the University of Tennessee, who just won the national championship in baseball, by the way, but I'm not bragging. But undergraduate studies, I didn't drink or smoke pot, and it still took me 6 years. But one thing I learned in a class was something called groupthink. And this is classic groupthink. You got one egghead at the top who thinks he knows more than everybody else. And then he puts out this, you know, somebody whispers in his ear, and then he tells all the others, and they just lap it up like, you know, Pavlov's dog ringing the bell. They just come salivating. And you got 51 of these people. And these are the people, these aren't somebody that's sitting around at a barber shop on Saturday morning, like I go to a little coffee group with my buddies. I call it a liars club. And these are supposed to be the top people in the world that we make decisions on that are literally life and death. I mean, everything they do deals with life and death. And yet they're so incompetent and they're so corrupted by this deep state sewer that Washington, D.C. has become. You know, that's why I called on Chairman Comer. I said, we got to investigate. Let's get them all in here. Let's get them under subpoena. Let's find out the chain of command, the thought process that went into getting this and how it went down.
Yeah. Good advice.
Sir, there seems to be a theme with this administration that, you know, titles matter, especially with respect to the intelligence community, and checking off boxes matters. And with specific respect to this person that the Biden administration has put in place, Tyler Cherry, this interesting individual who's now going to be a part of the Department of Interior, who tweeted out about cops being slave patrols and Free Palestine, and they're just not doing their vetting. Does it seem like it's just more important to them to have a face forward of wokeism than it is to actually have someone who is secure in the values of that administration?
Ma'am, I'd submit to you they are doing vetting, and this is what they're getting. Their polling is showing, look, I had lunch with a very successful Hispanic fella who just came over, who came over legally, Americanized in the last 15 years, became an American citizen, him and his wife, super successful. They love Donald Trump. I'm black folks, I talk to them all the time in the district, and they're coming up to me saying, hey, we like Trump. And the reason is, look, you know, you got crime-filled streets, there's no health care, there's no education for their kids, there's no hope. And the left is embracing the hard left, and they've got Biden's ear because they know if they don't have that core of far left anarchists, if you will, that they have lost everything. So they're trying to hold on to that and build from that. That is the only reason. This is pure politics, and that's why you got this nut in a dress, just like the last one. The last one, you know, got caught stealing. It was over one of our nuclear agencies, got caught stealing luggage at the airport more than once. And then, you know, you got this guy, and it's it's beyond belief. It is a DEI dream going on in the White House right now. You've got the president, probably got some 25-year-old, I won't call him a man, a guy who, with a man bun probably, has got the president's ear telling him, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. This is what young people are thinking, and they're not going to vote. And Donald J. Trump will be the next president of the United States.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people are, stop the world, I want to get off this Biden world. And I think that may be the moment that November brings us. Congressman, I want to ask, yesterday on the show, the former commissioner of the Customs Border Patrol Agency, Mark Morgan, came on and said he's been alarmed by the number of criminal aliens, meaning aliens who are crossing the border. It's not the act of crossing the border that's their crime. They've already committed crimes either here or in another country, and they're coming back in. He said it's skyrocketing beyond any exponential number he's ever seen. What's going on? Are other countries just dumping their prisons on America right now?
They are, and their mental health institutes. If you remember Cuba when they did the Mariana boat lift, the very same thing. The beginning of the movie Scarface pretty much kind of should have been a documentary, I'm afraid. But the reality is that is exactly what Central America is doing. But if you go into some of those countries, the odd thing is they don't have working age men and women that are left in those countries because they've all left up here. If you go into their factories and businesses down there, it's seniors and people that are not capable of making that long trek. So they're depleting everything they've got. And that's why if you're seeing numbers, the Biden administration, I got a feeling very soon is going to say, well, our numbers are coming down. Our programs are working. The reason they're working is they've run out of people to come across the dadgum border. This thing is a travesty. We are a dumping ground for Central America and these corrupt countries, and it can be stopped. H.R. 2 would have helped stop this. The last bill, you had to have 5,000 people over in one day before anything would take effect. And all it did was hire more attorneys. So, you know, this administration, I believe, did away with something like 90 of President Trump's initiatives and things he'd put in place to stop illegal immigration.
Amazing.
Yes, sir. H.R. 2 is something that Republicans worked very hard on. It's been collecting dust over in the Senate. If Republicans win back the majority in the Senate, is that the first bill they should take up and consider and pass?
Yes, ma'am, I think it should. And I think maybe even a stronger component, some more stronger components in it. But yeah, I think H.R. 2 would be a great start to build on.
Yeah, so very important. Real quickly, the story we had at the top of the show, the CIA knew that this letter was coming out about Hunter Biden, said nothing about it, concerning that the agency didn't speak up and try to stop interference in our election?
Yeah, deep state, 100%. If Trump gets back in, he better go through these departments like Grant through Richmond. You could look it up. Grant during the Civil War went through Richmond pretty brutally. But the truth is he better go through these departments, not just take the heads out. I think he needs to dismantle them. You know, last night I tweeted on my @Tim Burett site, I said, name me one 3-letter agency in Washington that you think ought to stay in power. And the overwhelming tens of thousands of people said none. because they're just so much distrust, and they've weaponized them against good, hardworking Americans.
It's amazing.
I saw that tweet and I thought about it and I couldn't come up with one. So I commend you for putting that out there. Also, congratulations on the overwhelming support for your bill. And also congratulations on all of your placement of the word dadgummit. You just used that word and willed it perfectly. Tennessee Congressman Tim Burett, thank you so much for being here. We'll have you back on again very soon. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hey, this July, as we celebrate the birth of our nation, it's important to reflect on the freedoms our forefathers fought for. But today, these freedoms are under attack. Look no further than the treatment of President Donald Trump. If the left can go after him with such ferocity, think they can and will come after us. That's why now, more than ever, we need to stick together and fight back. AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, is more than just a senior discount organization. AMAC is dedicated to protecting our conservative values and defending our rights. Learn more about how AMAC is actively fighting for our freedom by visiting amac.us/no noise. By joining AMAC, you're not just becoming a member, you're becoming part of a movement. This July 4th, let's pledge to stand united. Join AMAC today and ensure that our voices are heard. amac.us/. Welcome back, America. Thursday night's debate on CNN between President Trump and Joe Biden will kick off the most intense part of the remaining part of this election season. It'll go from there to the nominating convention starting in Milwaukee for the Republicans, another debate in September, and then the ground game, which, by the way, voting starts in mid to late September in places like Pennsylvania. So the election's actually just a couple of months away. We thought we'd bring in one of our favorite guests. He's not only a great political prognosticator and analyst, he's the chairman of the South Carolina Republican Party, which has seen so much success under his tutelage. He is Drew McKissick, and he joins us now. Mr. Chairman, good to have you on the show.
Great to be with you again. Thank you.
All right. I want to ask you about your advice. If you're talking to President Trump, what do you tell him to do on Thursday night when he's a 3-1 down in the at least the manpower on stage?
Well, exactly as you point out, that's basically what you're looking at. I mean, it's a 3-on-1 match. You've got Joe Biden and you've got, two of the Democrat mainstream media establishment, if you will. And they're going to be doing everything they can, in my opinion, to pin President Trump down basically on two things. One, on abortion, and two, on January 6th related issues. Think the past 2020 election and things related to January 6th.
Yep.
I think that's where they're going to try to keep the whole 90 minutes if they possibly could. I think the best thing that President Trump could do is when those come up, you take two sentences and then you pivot straight to the current reality, which is Joe Biden's record and where we are today. And two, what do you want to do for the country? Where do you want to take the country? This is about now, where we are now versus, where we were and where he wants to go, the things that he wants to do. And if he keeps it focused on that, then by default, we're talking about Biden's record. And that's the thing they don't want to talk about. Yeah. And if you do that for 90 minutes, then it's a success, in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mr. Chairman, I want to show you a clip from CNN because it plays into some news over the last few days of the fact check finally being corrected regarding the Very Fine People hoax. Check this out.
I do think it's worth noting that Donald Trump said there were good people fine people on both sides in Charlottesville when you had neo-Nazis marching that resulted in a death.
Now, since then, wow. Jake Tapper has clarified on air that in fact was not what Donald Trump said, but how I have a feeling that this is still going to come up at the debate.
So this is a fact check of the fact check of the fact check by Tapper. Is that what this is? I mean, how many times do we have to go through this conversation? How many times do you have to, as they would say in sports, let's go to the tape? Who said what, and what did they say, and what do they really mean? What was the context? They're real big on context, except when it doesn't help, sustain their talking point.
Good point.
And now, what is it? How many years after the fact does, Snopes get around and saying, oh, well, by the way, that was really not what he said. Well, it would have been nice, several years back, but okay, we'll take it, But the fact that you've got someone who's, part of a network that's going to be putting on a presidential debate several days after that fact check came out, just, goes right back to the talking points, tells you a lot about the network, in my opinion.
Yeah. So you've been in politics a long time. You've seen the ebb and flow of how government often interacts in politics. We started the story off today with a pretty significant revelation from Jim Jordan that several of the 51 intelligence experts who wrote that letter that falsely declared that the Hunter Biden laptop was a Russian hoax, it wasn't. They were on the payroll of the CIA, meaning they were contractors at the time, and that the CIA brass was apprised before the letter was coming out, and they didn't stop to intervene it. The intelligence community used to be neutral in American elections. It kind of feels like they have their thumb on some stuff. How do we fix that going forward?
Well, as Jethro Bodine used to say, surprise, surprise, surprise. I mean, go figure. I mean, yes, all these people were in the tank there. They were in on the joke.
They were.
And, the media happily lapped it up, ran the stories nationwide, taking the talking points, not stop to let's do a little fact checking. Let's make sure. No, they didn't do that. Are they working for the government? No, they didn't do that. They just ran with it because it fit their narrative. That's what they wanted to do. Going forward, the Trump administration is going to have personnel issues to work on, quite frankly. That was probably the biggest problem in the first Trump administration was, quite frankly, personnel who were there that preceded the president, being hamstrung by personnel in a lot of these departments for the policies that he wanted to go forward with. They were essentially had a cabal inside the government working against his policies while he's president. Hiring the right people is critical. As a good friend of mine would say all the time, personnel is policy. And the type of people we hire is the type of policies we're going to have, and that's going to apply to the future Trump administration as well.
Yeah, good point.
Mr. Chairman, as we are heading into the thick of things with the debate being Thursday and then the RNC going to be here before we know it, I know that one of the top issues on the minds of many Republicans is election integrity and election security. There in South Carolina, you have been doing a lot to secure your elections. Can you tell our audience about it?
Well, sure. The biggest thing that we did here in South Carolina after 2020, when we got down into the weeds of everything that went on around the country in all the different states, I was a part of the RNC's Election Integrity Committee. We looked at all those things, pulled them together in one report, and that report made recommendations. And every state was different, had different sets of laws, and would have different things in those recommendations that could apply. We didn't have the problems that other states had here in South Carolina back in 2020, but that didn't mean we couldn't make our laws even tougher. And we did. So a year and a half ago, we passed an election integrity bill, which took, I think, about 13 or 14 of those recommendations out of that report. And made it tougher. Everything from how audits are conducted here to how early voting operates, scaling back drastically on mail-in absentee ballots. We took mail-in absentees down from 500,000 to just 50,000 in the 22 election. Things like that give people a greater sense of security in how the elections are actually conducted. And that's important. But nationally, around the country, it varies depending on what state you're in. We've had legislative efforts where we can, where we have the legislature and the governor. We've had legal efforts where we could potentially try to have lawsuits to sue our way into a better setup if possible. And then where we can't make changes, we just have to be good, or rather better than the Democrats are, whatever those rules of the game may be. So think California, think Nevada, Arizona, some other states where, the rules are different. They've got, drop boxes. They've got ballot harvesting and so forth. And we've got to be better at it than they are in those states.
Yeah, and that effort's underway. You can see a lot of people working on improving that ground game this year. Sir, you've done a lot to expand the South Carolina Republican Party. In fact, I think they've won 31 consecutive statewide elections. That's pretty impressive. There is an opportunity for the rest of the Republican Party to grow Hispanics, African Americans, young voters, all parts of Democrats' constituents coming over. How do you close the deal? You've closed the deal in South Carolina. How do you close it elsewhere in the country this election?
The first thing is people have to understand how our message is relevant to them in their daily lives. If you don't, it's one thing to have a message and have a set of opinions or policies. But if you don't communicate that in a way that they understand, that's relevant to how I live my life, that's relevant to my family, my job, my kids, my future, then you're not going to get through. And there's a lot of clutter out there. And if you can't have a message that cuts through the clutter, it's not going to connect. I think what we're seeing and have been seeing in successive elections now is a bigger swath of the minority community, be it African American, especially African American males, Hispanics, et cetera, that are more and more open to Republican conservative ideas and policies. You saw that actually in 2020. Donald Trump got more of the Hispanic vote and the African American vote than any Republican presidential candidate since Richard Nixon in 1972.
Yeah.
And we've seen that support go up in the last several years.
It's pretty amazing.
I think we're going to set a huge record this time around. Absolutely.
Meeting them where they live and where they're at. That's the key, and that's what you've done so well in South Carolina. Mr. Chairman, great honor to have you on the show. We'll be sure to get you back after the debate. We'll have a lot of questions. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk about that CIA story we broke at the top of the story. My colleague, Stephen Richards, will be here right after the messages. Hey, America, can your IRA or 401k stand up to the next financial crisis that our top economists say is right at our doorstep? By allocating a percentage of your retirement into physical gold and silver with a tax-free rollover, you can diversify and safeguard your holdings from turbulent markets and economic downturns by putting your IRA back on the gold standard. A lot of people want that for the government, too. With a multi-trillion-dollar trade deficit and ongoing geopolitical instability, experts say now is the time to make the switch. Find out how to safeguard your assets with a tax-free rollover with a Genesis Gold IRA, the only IRA that can hold physical precious metals. Protect your retirement today with one simple phone call and receive your free gold and silver guide. How do you do that? You call Genesis Gold Group today at 833-457-06. Welcome back, America. We want to dive back into that story that we broke at the top of the show. The CIA has confirmed to Congress that some of the 51 signatories of that famous letter that tried to pretend that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation were CIA contractors, 2 for sure, active contractors. We don't know how many had been previous contractors. And separately, we know that the CIA brass, the leadership, knew that the letter was coming out before it did, but did not intervene. We want to jump right in with the reporter who made that story rock and roll on the Just the News website just a little bit ago. He's our great investigative reporter, Stephen Richards, and he joins us now. Stephen, this is a pretty big moment for the weaponization subcommittee today. The CIA is hard to get information out of on things like this, but there's a remarkable moment of transparency here. CIA brass knew this letter was coming. They didn't try to trip people up and stop it, right?
Indeed, that's true. And really, this has come full circle because Joe Biden famously used this in the last presidential debate to deflect from those stories about his son and his business dealings, which had dropped shortly before the election there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Stephen, it seems like, but at this point, I believe, so this was 2020, so 2019, the FBI already had the laptop. It seems like for a CIA brass, not the least of which would be Gina Haspel, that they would err on the side of not putting out this letter. Because if you don't know if the laptop is real, but you don't necessarily know that it's not Russian disinformation, then maybe you should chill on putting the letter out altogether.
Yes, indeed, Amanda. And this is one of the things that Chairman Jordan raised in his committee report that he just released today, wondering why Haspel, that she knew about the letter and didn't work to maybe slow the release and make sure that the facts were really checked there, because this did come out, and whether or not it was intended by the CIA to influence the election or not, it did have some effect because, as I mentioned, it was used in the debate.
Yeah, and one of the former CIA directors, Mike Morrell, was leading the charge on this. The Biden campaign and Tony Blinken, now the Secretary of State, was engaging on it. That's good stuff that we did a year ago. There's another element to this which has always been surprising to me. Very quickly, as this story was unfolding, and I had already corroborated with the FBI. I just called FBI sources and said, hey, you know about this laptop? Is it real? And they're like, yeah, we did our due diligence on it months ago. It's real. And then the ODNI at the time, John Ratcliffe, put out a statement saying there's no reason to believe this is Russian disinformation. Yet the CIA was quiet, and the media did not pick up on those two very powerful facts. There were facts sitting in the public domain that showed that this letter wasn't true. As we look back at that historical moment, it seems like PAC journalism overcame the facts, didn't they?
Yes, and that is true. And finally, the government recently used the laptop in its own prosecution of Hunter Biden, coming full circle and now recognizing publicly that its contents have been verified. And so I think what this represents is it's showing us even further what the political influence behind the publication of this letter. And as you mentioned, Secretary of State Blinken the CIA director, former CIA director Michael Morell, admitted that it was Blinken's call to him that spurred this letter to begin with.
Starts right with the Biden campaign.
Stephen, for the intelligence community, a community that I think for a long time Americans thought shouldn't be calling winners and losers. They shouldn't be calling balls and strikes. But now you have this that happened, and I think a lot of Americans are wondering what the remedy is. How do you prevent this from happening in the future? And John and I have talked about the prospect of revoking security clearance so that they can't make money further as contractors. But what was mentioned today in that hearing as something that could be a remedy?
I think something that the Weaponization Committee is focusing on is really pointing out how these former officials have, as you mentioned, retained access to their security clearances. They continue to have access to the information that the CIA possesses, and at the same time are working out in the private sector, often with their own political agendas, as we saw in this case, related to the Biden campaign. But we wouldn't really want this with any political campaign, interfacing with these former CIA officials in order to achieve a political goal.
Yeah, it's they put their thumb on the scale of an election, and there's been really no consequence for it for any of those 51. Stephen, I want to turn into some of the great work you've done. We've been staying here late at night, several nights, going through 3.39 million pages of documents that the FBI actually gathered from Hunter Biden and his business partners all the way back in 2016. There are so many secrets that we've already uncovered that show the government knew so much more about the Biden influence peddling activities. Tell us what you think's most struck you as you've gone through these documents.
So really what we found in this new trove is hundreds of emails that were not present on this laptop we were just discussing. And it really shows in some ways how Hunter Biden acknowledged his role in a lot of these schemes where he has publicly denied having such a role. And I think what we'll see in the future with some of this reporting is that he might be closer to some of the schemes that he has distanced himself from, including his work with the Burnham Securities firm.
I think that's a hint, Amanda. Just say it. That's a hint.
I think so, from someone who's behind the curtain as well. Yeah. News burst on the scene this morning, Stephen, something that you covered, that Hunter Biden, I think most people are looking for something to happen, for there to be some type of punishment if crimes were committed, some type of something, anything at all, even if it's some type of professional disbarment. And lo and behold, today, D.C. Bar has revoked his law license. Tell us about it.
Yes, so this morning we got a ruling from the D.C. Bar, and according to its internal rules, as soon as someone who is a member of their bar is convicted of a serious crime, they are automatically to be suspended. And the bar also recommended that he be investigated for his conduct so they can ultimately rule on whether he will be allowed to keep his license in the district.
Yeah. Important stuff. We're going to be keeping a close eye on that one. Real quickly before we go, the House Judiciary Committee today made clear that it was going to move forward with contempt proceedings against Joe Biden's ghostwriter because he's the guy that had access to classified information. What's next on that? Do we have a vote tomorrow or markup tomorrow?
Yeah, well, so, John, the markup is coming on Thursday, according to the Judiciary Committee. And why this is really important is this ghostwriter apparently has transcripts and audio recordings of nearly all his conversations with President Biden when he was the former vice president, and these in preparation for his memoir. And so, according to Special Counsel Hur's report on the classification of documents, Biden admitted in those recordings that he presented that information to his ghostwriter.
But he shared classified information, something that even Donald Trump wasn't accused of. Stephen, we love the work you do every day. It seems like every couple of days we got a scoop on the show that comes from your great work. Thanks for joining us with a big update. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We've got one more block to go. Amanda and I have a lot to dig into, so don't go away. We've got some final parting thoughts before we hand off to Grant Stitchfeld. Hey folks, if you're like me, your home is your castle and it's likely your most precious and valuable asset. So why aren't you protecting it? Homes across America are being stolen in a scam called title theft. That's why you need home title protection. Think about this. If no one is watching out for your title, then it's just a matter of time until one of these cyber thieves target you. Don't fall prey to these thieves. Go to HometitleLock.com to make sure your title is safe. And use the promo code JUSTNEWS. They'll send you a complete title scan of your home's title, and you'll get 30 days free of triple lock home title protection. That's a great deal. Go to HometitleLock.com, use the promo code JUSTNEWS. Protect your castle. It's a smart thing to do.
Let's make them wonder. Let's squeeze them for a change instead of them constantly squeezing us. And then
Welcome back, everybody. It's the final segment of the show. So much news today, but let's start at the top. Let's start with Dave Bossie. John, Dave has always had one of the keenest political minds that we've ever had on this show, and it's always so interesting to hear his take on the debates. What do you think about it?
Listen, I think he's got the right advice for the president. They're going to try to pin you down in the past, and this debate is about the future. He said, keep talking about how you're going to fix today's problems tomorrow, not litigate things that have happened in the past. The Supreme Court ruling Roe v. Wade, 2 years old. The 2020 election, 4 years old. Stay focused on the future and pivot. He used the word pivot. I think Drew McKissick similarly said that. Two guys have been very successful in politics. I think that's some pretty good advice for the president. I'm curious what advice Democrats have for Joe Biden. I mean, obviously, don't mumble, don't get lost, don't walk off stage, don't shake hands with any fake people. But I mean, on the substance of the debate, what does Joe Biden do? And I think it'll be interesting to see in the first 20 minutes of the debate Thursday night what Joe Biden does. I think it'll signal to us what he's been sitting 7 days in the bunker training with.
Yeah, and you know what rings so true to me is the fact that Joe Biden, you know, we haven't heard from him in, 5-6 days at this point, because he is doing debate prep with a baker's dozen or so of people who are helping him out with that. But you know, for someone who is in their presidency, I understand that you are dealing with policy decisions, you are dealing with the business of the country, but you're in your administration. You are actively employing the policies that you are going to be on that stage defending.
That's a good point.
Why on earth do you need this much prep work? You're doing the job. Why do you need to prep for the job if you're doing the job right now?
That's why he has to have a guide telling him who to call in the press room too, right? I think it's kind of self-evident maybe what's going on. You know, what's so historic about this debate, it's hard to, sometimes we talk about the present, we forget some of the history on this. It's the first debate that's ever happened this early between general election candidates. And secondly, it's the first time in a very long time that a former president is running against the current president. They're only 4 years removed from each other. And so there's like two really clear records of what 2017 to 21 looks like and what 21 to 24 looks like. I just think that is going to be unprecedented for anyone who's watched a prior presidential debate. It's going to be pretty darn interesting, if you ask me.
Yeah, and I think that there are a few moments that President Trump can seize on with respect to what I think is going to be thrown his way. They're going to probably talk about him as a convicted felon, but President Trump could just gently remind them that Joe Biden wasn't even fit to stand trial, according to Robert Hur. So there's that. What do you think about these folks who have signed off on this letter, members of Congress who have signed off on the letter for a drug test? President Trump says, I'll do it anytime, anywhere, any place. Let me go.
Yeah, not going to happen. So take it out. And, you know, I think what has to happen in the next 48 hours is people need to focus on what is possible. And, you know, there's a lot of things going around. What is possible? I do think you could see a contempt vote just before the debate for Joe Biden's ghost writer, which is going to put the focus back on the fact that Joe Biden did something Donald Trump's not even accused of doing with his classified documents, and that is he shared it with someone knowingly and willing, and then that person apparently, according to Robert Hur, tried to get rid of some of that evidence or couldn't find some of that evidence. That's really important stuff. And I think that what's possible is what needs to be focused on. What can you actually get done? Not fun things that get you a headline, but go nowhere. And there's a lot of things that Republicans talk about in the House right now that aren't going anywhere. They ought to focus on what's possible. What Andy Biggs talked about in the show yesterday, that's possible. They could get a vote to declare the work of the J6 committee unreliable and unconstitutionally created. That's something that I think could be a win for the American people. Focus on what's possible.
Yeah. Hey, very quickly before we go, your thoughts on Monica Lewinsky pressing for the impeachment of who's that, Judge Eileen Cannon down in Florida in the Mar-a-Lago case?
If you got one president impeached, you probably should stay out of a debate of future impeachment. That would be my advice to her. But what do I know?
Oh boy, it's interesting hearing from her all these years later, but we're heading into an election season and anything is possible. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for us tonight. We appreciate all of you being here. Make sure you head over to justthenews.com and check for all of those headlines, of course, from my great co-host, John Solomon, but also the guest who we just had on a moment ago, Stephen Richards. He is always putting out fantastic reporting. We appreciate you all being here tonight, and we are going to have post coverage of that debate on Thursday following its close. But that's it for us tonight. We hope that you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Grant Sinchfield is going to take you through the next hour, but we'll be back here at 6 p.m. Eastern tomorrow.